Hello, welcome. I'm Heather Furby with Casa Luna Canines, Dog Training, Human Learning. So this is the first of our community seminars. And so welcome, and we're gonna geek it up today. I've got Luna who's down here disturbing me. She might come up, say hi. Come on, come on. Hi, that's Luna. Hi. Okay, now go lie down. So welcome. Why we talk about dog training, human learning, as this is part of the human learning side. So I want to teach you guys a little bit about the human aspect of what we go through. Today, we're going to talk a lot about the learning theory. So I know this can get really dry. So I've got Alan here, who's our great marketing, my husband, and he's going to keep me honest that if I get too geeky in theory, he's going to swing it around so we can get to being practical. We've got some stuff up on the board, but there's so much gobbledygook and mumbo jumbo, all that stuff that's out there about the types of training. So we want to clear up a lot of pieces today. And I want to be really transparent. The standard to call yourself a dog trainer, pretty darn low these days. Basically, you have a dog, you just call yourself a dog trainer. So that's why I want to say we are really backing all the certifications and trying to get a rein on some of this dog training regulation, because I think it's so important, because there's so many outdated theories out there and just non-standardized practice, and we're actually doing more harm than good. Shelters right now, this is spring 2024, shelters are full to capacity across the states. Breeders are gone out of control. People are giving up dogs at an alarming rate. And actually, I mean, we were recently reading a study, I think over 50% of people show some form of regret having a dog, with their choice to get a dog. And it's all because of training, for the most part. They invest hundreds and hundreds of dollars into training, and they still have all these behavior problems. Your dog's still barking at the door, or pulling on leash, or attacking squirrels or the cats, or, you know, the things that don't translate to sit and down in the confines of a classroom. And in fact, that's how most training classes are taught. You go to a classroom, you're taught these very operant conditioning, or, you know, cues, commands. We tell our dog to do a behavior, they do the behavior, we walk out. Expert. But then the moment you get to that door, your dog just behaves perfectly, and you're like, I have a store, and you get to the door, oh my God, they pull you out, or they won't get in the car, they're salivating in the car, they're anxious, you get home, they chase the cat, and you're like, what happened to that awesome dog? So that's what we're going to get to today. One of the things that stands in the way of a lot of dog training regulation, and the way that we try to standardize these practices, is that there's a real fight among a lot of dog trainers, to be honest, about positive reinforcement versus balanced training. That's what they call it. It's going to go on forever. I'm not going to solve it in this video, but I want you to be aware of what the kind of all the, as we started, the gobbledygook is, so that we can break this down and you can make a choice of a kind of trainer you want to work with. So as we said, we try to support the certifications. So we are, well, I am knowledge assessed, the CPDT, Certification of Professional Dog Trainers, knowledge assessed. There's only about 500 of us in California. So it's a pretty rigorous exam. And so we're doing that, and then support all these other certifications that come out. So what's that called is, people are going to call themselves positive reinforcement trainers, balanced trainers. Now there's a new thing that's out there, which is a lot of fear-free, force-free training. It kind of sums up a lot of pieces. And I'm going to tell you why we're coming up with fear-free, force-free training pretty much today, as we go through what is positive reinforcement training. So I've been staring at a light, and now I can't read my notes. That's the negative side of doing this. I can't see anything with the light. All right, so let's try to sort all this out. So what we've got here is, what this video, we're going to focus on what is positive reinforcement training. And we're going to start with a lot of the who's who. So you're going to find that the who's who in dog training and learning theory is, some of them are the same in human behavioral theory. So kind of, we've got the father of all trainers, Pavlov. And as you know, the Pavlov is focused on classical conditioning that we've got a natural physiological response in his studies drooling when food is presented. So it's a natural response, physiological response in terms of the stimulus, right? And so we take that natural response and the stimulus and we pair it with an unrelated stimulus. So this is classical conditioning. So food's presented, dog drools, right? That's your condition and response, while your stimulus is the food, response is drooling. Great. Now we can pair the stimulus with something outside. So like a bell ringing equals food, right? So now we've paired bell ringing equals food, food equals drool. So very soon when we consistently pair those, then what we get is the bell ringing is automatic drool. And we can bypass that, the initial stimulus that caused the response. That's just classical conditioning. Classical conditioning has everything to do with physiological. So something that's going to happen anyway. It's not an action. It can be an emotion, a, drool, panic, shaking, anything like that. We can pair a stimulus with that response and we get classical conditioning. So I just want to say that because that's Skinner. That's Pavlov. And Pavlov is basically the beginning of all behavior training. So we've got that. Then we move on to Thorndike. Thorndike has this law of effect. I'm going to not talk too much about that theory, but at Coslin and Canines, we talk about this as dog law. The idea of Thorndike's principle and law of effect is that there are situations or behaviors that an animal likes to or wants to perform. And sorry, I'm thrown off that. I can't see still. Let's start that over. Oh, I don't like this at all. I'm just gonna wait for my site to come back. Okay, we're back. Sorry, switch, blah, 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 quick set change. I had a bright light in my eyes and I couldn't see anything. So I had to change that. So it's gonna look like I'm gonna look at my notes and it was all just blurry. So thanks for sticking with us on that one. Okay, so we talked about Pavlov, kind of the father of behaviorism and classical conditioning. We get to Thorndike. Thorndike had, it's called the law of effect. At Coslin and Canines, this is what you're going to hear us. We refer to it as dog law. The basics of dog law is if it works, I'm going to do it again. If it doesn't work, it's not worth my effort. So when we break that down into kind of the actual theory is that an action that has a lovely consequence, a dog is more likely to do over and repeat. An action that has a consequence that they don't like is less likely to be repeated. So dog law. If it works, I do it again. If it didn't work, I don't like it. So that can be a lot of things. Chasing squirrel, super fun. That's awesome. Somebody do that over and over and over. Chasing a skunk, maybe the outcome wasn't so pleasant. So I'm not going to do that again. Now, as we know, pleasant and not pleasant, this is where we're going to get into positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, those kinds of things, is in the eye of the beholder. So we look at positive and negative punishment and reinforcement from the dog's perspective. So we think it's terrible to get sprayed by a skunk. We think it's horrible. And why would my dog ever do that again? Dog's like, that worked. That was awesome. So it was a little stinky. It doesn't bug me. Going to do it again and again. So that's why we say, hey, it works from their perspective, right? So we've got Pavlov. Thorndike's the basically the father law of effect. So dog law. Move into quickly Skinner. He is really one that started a lot of behavioral psychology, and his basics is that behavior is controlled by a stimulus immediately followed by a response. and a consequence. A stimulus followed by an action and a consequence. So we start thinking of this as the beginning of operant conditioning and training. In dog world, the sit, the action of sitting, is followed by the consequence of a treat, right? So action of sitting leads to consequence treat. That's good. Back to Thorndike, I'm going to repeat that more and more. So that's where we start with this operant conditioning. Then that brings us into Premack, who is a little bit, takes it to another level of, did most of his studies on primates. And David Premack said that an action that the animal will do an action they enjoy more than an action they don't enjoy. The easiest way to put this is it's called Grandma's rule. We all know it. You have to eat your vegetables before you get dessert, right? Don't want to eat my vegetables, but I want dessert, so I'm more likely to eat my vegetables, so I get dessert. So then we start putting that in dog law. Your dog, we want to ask your dog to sit and wait calmly, right? It's not so fun for a dog, but they're more likely to do it if they're by the door, because the consequence then is I get to go outside and play. So I'm going to do a behavior that I don't enjoy so that I'm allowed to do the behavior I enjoy. So you don't need to be tested on all these, obviously, but I'm bringing it in because they all come together in what we call positive reinforcement training. Now, they're also come together in what's called balance training. And balance training, I don't know, it's the word that people use for, because I'm not all positive reinforcement. I like to use positive punishment. I like to use negative reinforcement, negative punishment. So now we want to go down that rabbit hole and say, what is positive reinforcement? What is positive punishment? Those are terms that we're not always really familiar with, other than positive reinforcement in dog training. So I want to kind of go through these 4 quadrants. And then once we are super, super confused, we're going to go through it in real life. So you ready? Let's get. So I didn't want to use red anyway. All right. So we are going to go here. I just want to look at my notes, make sure I didn't forget anything. Well, I guess I just want to say that we're leaving out a lot of the talk of classical conditioning and operant conditioning. I love talking about that stuff. So if you do send a message, we can have a geek out session. But that's where a lot of the terms that we get into, desensitization and counter conditioning, that kind of falls into that realm. A little too geeky for what we're doing here, but just know that they exist and we can talk about it if you just let me know. I think after this, there's always a survey about what do you want to see next. So let me know if that's interesting, if you're a super geek like me. All right, so what we want to look at here, we've got across here this R, if you can see it, R, that's the reinforcement, P is punishment. So reinforcers, this is in behavioral learning, right? Reinforcement means doing something that the consequence is more likely to repeat itself. So if I'm reinforcing a behavior, it's more likely to reoccur, right? So it strengthens a behavior. Punishment is going to weaken or lessen the behavior. So if I reinforce it, I'm trying to strengthen and keep the behavior going. If I punish it, I'm trying to stop the behavior or lessen the behavior. Okay? Now, again, this is from the eye of the dog. So we get over here and we say this is positive and negative. So I don't want you to get the P's confused because P is for punishment, but that's positive. This is negative. Now, again, from the eyes of the dog or the experience of the dog. Positive, we're adding something to the dog. So we give the dog something or we add a stimulus to the dog. Negative, we take away, right? So we're going to take something away from the dog. So now we can have these quadrants. We can have positive reinforcement. We can have positive punishment. And you see R plus R, positive reinforcement, those things, but we can have positive reinforcement, positive punishment, negative reinforcement, which is R negative, and negative punishment, right? What the heck? What does all that mean? So I'm going to show you positive reinforcement because that's the one we're familiar with. And then we're going to go down the rabbit hole because balanced trainers like to say that they use all of them for the most part. And in fact, in a lot of our organizations, there's something called LIMA that you might start hearing, LIMA, least invasive, minimally aversive. So least intrusive, sorry, minimally aversive. So we try to do the least amount of harm that we can. I personally think most LIMA policies are way outdated. I have a statement on my website saying we support some of the organizations because they're doing the certification, but I actually don't believe in a lot of the LIMA stuff because my practice is I will never get to positive punishment. I just don't believe it. I don't think that there's room for it. It's a very abusive way of going about life. But we're going to talk about that because I know some of you totally disagree with me, and that's okay. So first, let's talk about positive reinforcement. That's what we do. Dog sits, I reinforce with a treat. I see the dog being calm, I give treats to reinforce that. Dog brings a ball back to me, I reinforce it by playing and tug, doing something fun, then I throw the ball again. So it's a behavior that I like, and I'm adding something, a treat, a toy, a play, a game, games-based training, because it's fun. So they're likely to repeat that behavior over and over. So I positively reinforce. I add something, give something to the dog to make sure that this behavior is strengthened. Right? So that's it. That's why we are rewards-based. That's why a lot of what we start to do is rewards with treats, and then we reward with toys, and we try to wean off treats. But my years in service dog training showed me that if you don't keep reinforcing something that you want them to do, positive reinforcement, the dog will go back to that Thorndike principle and be like, it's really not worth my time anymore. I don't like doing it. Getting your keys is not naturally reinforcing for a dog. Opening a door, not naturally reinforcing. They'll do it because they learned it, but then if we don't positively reinforce, eventually the dog's going to say, it's really not worth my time. And plus, I saw you get your keys one time, so I know you can do it, and good luck. And that's why we have to bring service dogs back in every once in a while and retrain. And that's why working with you guys, I say this is a lifelong thing of training. It's not just a one and done. A lot of us train our dogs to come, sit, look at us in the eye for long periods of time. Pretty boring. And then we go, why do I always have to feed my dog treats? Why do I have to keep reinforcing a sit? Because a sit is a boring action for a dog, whereas coming to do leg weaves, coming around, do thunder through your legs, have fun and run, that's reinforcing. I ask the dog to sit there as I boringly dole out treats. After a while, your dog is going to be like, that's not reinforcing. So we got to also stay on our game and switch it up. So we'll talk about that in a different video, or if you see it, download the Buddy Basics ebook, or I think it's a purchase, or you get that with any one of our classes. But we talk a lot about that bonding and synchronizing, instructing, coaching, those pieces that talk about the games that are positive reinforcement. So that's positive reinforcement. The basis of it is I'm giving something to the dog to try to make that behavior happen more and more. You're going to see the subtleties of why this is so tricky in dog training and why it's also so fun. So I am actually going to then go to negative reinforcement. Nope, I'm actually going to go across the circle here and go to negative punishment. And why is that? Is because positive reinforcement trainers often use negative punishment. This is taking something away from the dog, right? Negative, taking something away from the dog's perspective in order to lessen or decrease a behavior probability of happening. So what does that look like? Why would I use negative punishment? My dog's running up on me, jumping. I turn and ignore, right? From the dog's perspective, I'm taken away. And my hope is that the behavior decreases. So he's not going to jump because he's not getting rewarded for that, right? So I took something away that he wants, or she wants, me, and I hope, and turn my back, and hope is that the dog stops jumping. Obviously, that has some inherent issues with it, but we're taking it away so that the dog stops the behavior. Dogs chewing on a shoe. I'm going to take that shoe away in hopes that they stop chewing, right? So we always put ourselves in the position of the dog. What does the dog think is positive? What does the dog think is negative? What does the dog have a likely consequence of repeating the behavior or of stopping the behavior, right? So it's much more nuanced than this. We're going to go into this practicality, but this is why these two tend to go hand in hand. When we say we're positive reinforcement trainers, it's a little bit of a lie because we often use negative punishment in hand with positive reinforcement to try to shape the behaviors we want. Now, this is very based in operant conditioning and that kind of training, as opposed to some of the brain-based behavior training we do, but they're also very much interwoven, as you're going to see with some of the examples. So I add something to reinforce the behavior. I give a dog a treat. Take something away in hopes that the behavior will stop. So now we've got the two that are the others. Positive punishment and negative reinforcement. So negative reinforcement is, I'll give you a minute, see if your brains work this way. It's reinforcement, so what are we trying to do? Strengthen a behavior. And it's negative, so we're going to take something away. So what possibly would be a negative reinforcer? How could we take something away to strengthen a behavior? So think of, we're out on a walk, and the dog sees something, starts to pull, and I pop that leash back, right? We think that's adding something, but from the dog side is I might pull the leash and they stop chasing or they stop pulling, right? So we're reinforcing the not pulling. So I'm trying to reinforce the staying near me because pressure stopped. I get this is where it gets tricky, but this is from the dog's perspective. I go after a squirrel, I'm being pulled, I get pulled back. Oh, that was unpleasant. So I'm going to stop the unpleasant thing, and that by not pulling, right? So I'm going to stay by your side. That way we're reinforcing a behavior, and something was taken away, the pressure on the leash. So we always got to think through these. I'm going to give you some examples in just a sec, and your brain might be as confused as mine was at the end of this, but we all think about from the dog's perspective. So negative reinforcement might be they're walking, pull, the pull stops, and then I get to go forward again. So I'm reinforcing a behavior of loose leash, but I did it through taking something away, which would be pressure, right? So we'll get some other examples of that in real world. And then the last one that I say I don't use is positive punishment. So we're adding something positive from the dog's perspective in order to decrease a behavior. This is the stuff that, I'm just going to be honest, I'm tired of having the discussion around it. These are the shock collars, prong collars, pinch collars, the loose leash that Holties and gentle leaders often come into the negative reinforcement group, and we'll explain that. But these are the things, electric shock fences are all in positive punishment. Because what we're trying to do is stop a behavior by adding something, adding that electric shock, adding the pain, adding the fear, adding the domination effect in order to stop a behavior. It's outdated. I hate it. I'm not even going to be nice about it. It's abusive. It's something, I'm going to do something to this dog so they stop that behavior. And I just go, why would you want to do that? First of all, they're going to stop the behavior. Dogs they learn very, they don't generalize. So they're very contextual learners. So I'm going to stop that behavior when you are present, and that's it. So if you've done some shock collars with your dog, there's a chance that you got a result, and it might even be the result that you want. But because dogs have such a deep association, chances are they associated it with you being around. So then the next person comes around and they go, oh, brand new setting. I don't have to, I can chase that squirrel. I can run. I can jump on people. I'm not going to get shocked. So I'm going to do that. So when you're not present, you become part of this picture for the dog, that your presence is the one that controls the behavior. And some of you are probably going, that's what I'm looking for. I want my dog to listen to me. But there's so many other ways we can do this by having fun and developing a strong bond with your dog that's really fun and interactive rather than power over your dog. Because the associations the dogs make, it's so scary. We think, hey, I don't know, every time somebody uses positive punishment, it will always be prefaced with, it's a safe tool if used correctly. And it's that if used correctly part that you can tell I'm really passionate about it, but I get sick of it because it's if used correctly. If I handed you a gun, and I don't care like what your belief is on guns, that's not what we're talking about, but I hand you a gun and I go, it's actually, in my belief too, this is a safe tool when used correctly, right? If it used incorrectly, it kills, it does permanent damage, it causes fear, it's a terrible weapon. But if used correctly, it's a great weapon. And it will prevent a lot of other people's behaviors from happening if you pull out a gun and show them, and if used correctly, or to defend yourself if used correctly. But I hate that if used correctly because it's so very presumptuous of us trainers to think I can talk you through how to use it correctly, and that I could get in the head of a dog and understand what their experience of pain is like, and then assume, oh, I used it correctly. So I just go, why bother? Just X amount. I think anything that causes fear, pain, and intimidation to your dog, be it verbal or physical, just needs to be off the radar. Because here's the fact, we're going to get mad at our dogs anyway, once in a while. It's just, we're humans, right? We get mad at the people we love. We get mad at the things we love because they're going to do silly things. And it's our primate need to scream at them and scream louder. Just know that when that happens, that's a chance to look in the mirror, calm down, reflect, and realize you're not actually training your dog. You're just being crazy lady, which I do really well. But, you know, I know that if I lose it, if I got that annoyed that I have to yell at my dog, there's a whole lot of other stuff going on. And it's time for me to empty my bucket, the emotional bucket that we talk about, which is I got to get a rest. I got to go for a walk. I got to calm down, because the dogs actually don't wake up in the morning and go, I wonder how I can make your life miserable. I mean, when they're adolescents, we sometimes think that, but they're actually just doing dog stuff. That's that Thorndike law of effect. They're having fun. So they're going to do dog stuff. They're going to entertain themselves. And the way they choose to entertain themselves may or may not be the way we want them to entertain themselves. So we get back to this. This is a lot. I know. Aha, we're back. Okay, a little technical issue. We don't know what happened. Okay, so where we left off, I know this gets mind numbing. Positive, negative, adding something, taking something away from the perspective of the dog. Reinforcing, punishment. Reinforcement means we're trying to strengthen the behavior. Punishment, weaken the behavior. So we can have positive or negative punishment and reinforcement. Okay. So when we talk about positive reinforcement, you see that we're not just talking about one little quadrant, but we're going to spend most of our time there. But we do some positive reinforcement and some negative punishment. Where I tend to stay away from is the negative reinforcement and the positive punishment, because those are usually causing fear and harm. That's what they're based in. So, are we ready to put this into action? I got some questions. Get out your quadrants, see what we can do. So, we're going to give some examples. I'll talk through it. So, we've got a very easy one, which I already said. An invisible fence is an example of. So, I'm actually going to make this quadrant again. Right. This is reinforcement, punishment. We're going to go positive, negative. Okay. So an electric invisible fence. What do you think that is? Let's think through. Why would we be using an invisible fence? Because you want the dog to stop running off, right? So we're trying to stop a behavior. So that's got to be punishment, right? We're hoping, at least, that what we're doing is decreasing a behavior. What does an invisible fence do? When the dog comes up to it, what happens? They get shocked, right? So that's going to be adding something. So it clearly comes over here into positive punishment is the invisible fence, right? So nobody's going to argue that because we add positive, we add unpleasant stimulus so that the dog doesn't try to cross this border. So that's where we are. So now let's look at, okay, I'm out mowing the grass, right? And Luna is going to stand at the window barking until the mower's turned off and I put it away. Okay, so we've done that before. Maybe it's your vacuum cleaner, maybe it's a mop, whatever. I'm mowing, dog barks until the mower is turned off. I know this is a tricky one, but we got to look at it from the perspective of the dog. So dog, what's happening? Action, dog's barking. Consequence, from the dog's point of view, is the mower gets turned off, right? So that was awesome. If I don't like the mower, I bark until the mower's turned off. So what does that become? Well, I'm going to now do it every time because I'm going to bark and bark and bark every time the mower's on, which is reinforcement, right? But then what happens? I bark from the perspective of the dog, the mower goes away. So that barking at the window from the dog, I wish I had better writing, at window, barking at window, that is negative reinforcement from the dog's perspective. So I didn't do anything, right? All I was at was mowing. So this had nothing to do with me, but dog said, bark, 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 mower goes away. I win, right? Perfect. So that's why we look at it from, hi Luna, hi. That's why we look at it from the dog's perspective. So every time when you think about this, your dog is getting negative reinforcement because they are reinforcing a behavior they're going to do over and over. So same thing when they see a squirrel. Why do they bark every time at the squirrel? Like the squirrel goes away. Why do we got to bark? Because we made the squirrel go away. So the dog is thinking, I have agency. I had some control over that squirrel going away. What are we doing? It's so very exciting, isn't it? I wish we could film Luna. She's very worried about something outside. So she's going to do negative reinforcement, which is I'm going to bark because I'm worried, and then the thing goes away. And I'm going to keep doing it. So what I have to do then is change it into positive reinforcement, which is do something that's better than barking at the window. That's how we're going to turn that around. That's when we get into the reframe, manage, train. I don't want her to bark at the window. I do want her to sit quietly when the mower's on. So I've got to come up with something more exciting than the mower. And we get into, that's what we call desensitization, counter conditioning, doing positive reinforcement with, some disengagement games. If you've worked with me, you know that I love those. So we'll get into a little bit of how do you do it, but not so much now. We're going to geek out to the what is all this stuff. Okay, so we got two of them. So we got bark at the window, visible fence. What's another one? Okay, I've got a dog in class. So Nico doesn't like playing with other dogs. So whenever a dog approaches him, he turns his butt to them until they walk away. So what do you think that is? If he doesn't like playing with other dogs, so we already know he doesn't like other dogs. So he turns around, dog goes away. So what do you think that is? So we look at the consequence is what makes it reinforcing or punishing. So the dog goes away, Nico's happy because he doesn't like dogs. So that's got to be a reinforcer, right? Because he's going to do it over and over because the dog went away. And what did Nico do? He took himself away, so the dog goes away, so it comes back here. So same thing with Nico ignoring is a a negative reinforcer. So is your brain, are you about to turn this off and be like, I don't get this. I know it's hard. But I want to keep looking at it because there's just, like I said, there's so much kind of BS about what is positive reinforcement training. So why we focus so much on positive reinforcement is you're going to see how many of these real life examples from the dog's perspective already come under these other things. So we're trying to reinforce not by being mean to our dogs, but by being better than the conversations that they're having out there, being more exciting. Dogs think of the world in terms of value. So I want to be the best value. And my dog's going to be like, hey, being around you is actually, it's fun, it's entertaining, I get treats, I play toys. Why do I even need to walk off and have a conversation with the big grizzly bear on the other side of the property? I can just be around here and all good things happen. That's a lifetime of a bond and training and being aware and synchronizing with your dog and making sure that we're meeting our dog's needs. And then we start training them. And that's when every dog's personality is going to come through. And that's why we find certain dogs we call biddable. They're the ones that can really stay up here in this positive reinforcement because they're just like, oh, I get treats. I'll hang around for treats. This is good. I'll do what you want to do because this is easy. And then you're going to have the dogs that we don't call, they're often very smart, but we call them stubborn. We come up with all kinds of words because we think they're untrainable. But really, it's that they inherently don't see value in what we're providing. So a lot of the working breeds are this way because they weren't bred to need us. They were bred to go do their job out there. And so they're not harder. You got to get more creative to train them because you've got to overcome these instincts of what do they see as positive, negative, and what's the consequence of reinforcement and punishment. Okay, so let's move on. What's another one? We did that one. Okay, so we did this one, I think, but Luna loves jumping on people when they come to the front door. So now we'd ask everyone that comes to the front door to turn their back on the dog until they stop jumping. So now we got to think about that, right? Before we said that turning your back on the dog could be negative reinforcement, right? But I want you to think about this now from the dog's perspective. So Luna likes people coming to the door. She loves people. So, but she's jumping on them. And so we're going to turn our back and hope that she stops jumping. So we are trying to stop a behavior, right? By taking something away. It's taking us away to stop a behavior. So this would be the turn the back. Comes under negative punishment. Okay, now let's look at this. What else we're looking at is something that comes up in positive punishment is the classic, bring that knee up. If dog jumps, bring the knee up. The idea is we think we're doing something negative, right? It's the punishment. You're supposed to not like it and stop jumping. What do you do with that dog that gets super excited? You knee and then they jump more and they jump more. That's the tricky one. When we go in, we're like, well, here's the one of what I think I'm doing is positive punishment, right? Because we think the knee up is going to stop jumping. So I added my knee. It's unpleasant, so it's supposed to stop the behavior, right? But what if I got a dog that loves the interaction and just thinks that's fun and just gets all hyped up and jumps more, right? What they're seeing that as is positive reinforcement because they're going to jump more because they get the knee, they get interaction, they get so much fun. So what are we supposed to do in that? That's where we got to get to know our dogs. Get to know what your dog likes and doesn't like. If your dog gets excited by you yelling and you're trying to yell at them and intimidate and do some positive punishment to yell at them and be like, get away from the door, you stop that. You're coming over and you think you're going to be big and rough and your dog's like, sweet, I got a interaction. This is awesome. I saw this positive reinforcement. You were trying to tell me it was punishment, but that's not how I saw it. So that's why we got to get to know our individual dogs. And the number one thing I hear from people in training is, but my old dog, but I grew up with a dog, but I've had poodles my entire life, but I've had Labradors, I've had hunting dogs my entire life. This one is driving me crazy. Yes, So there's a couple things. Obviously, dogs are bred different today than they were even in my childhood, than they were 10 years ago. Breeding has gone just amok. A lot of people breed for looks and not for temperament. So we get a lot of crazy dogs out there that look really cute, but they're just not capable of functioning the same way in the world. And yet our expectations are that now my dog goes everywhere and does everything and enjoys it with me and can behave perfectly in every situation. But we don't know how to train for that. That's actually service dog level behavior. So I'm going to take a dog that was not bred for temperament and try to turn it into a dog that likes everything and everyone in every place. You can see the mismatch, that dogs used to just be our backyard buddies. So the temperament didn't matter as much. They could kind of be jerks, but they basically stayed in the backyard. And if they were real jerks, we didn't bring them out. Very rarely growing up did I see somebody that had a dog that was awesome enough to bring like to the soccer field and enjoy everybody and not run around the field and ruin the game. But we kept them in the backyard, so we didn't ask them to go everywhere. And then they were also bred for very specific things. So we'll geek out to that in another session, but just know what kind of dog you have, maybe the history, what it's bred for, and then how are you using that dog. So if you've got a working class breed that is used to having acres or running and herding, and you are living in a city apartment, you've got to get creative to how to use that instinct and positively reinforce the behaviors you want, because we can't train out like that herding instinct. I can't train out prey drive or the fun to attack, but I can use those in games so that my dog has impulse control. And I've done so much positive reinforcement on being calm, on being confident, on having a soft mouth, that actually gets a better reward than the running around chewing everything. So now you can start seeing why positive reinforcement is used quite a bit. So now one more, we're going to look at how does a gentle leader work, because those are tricky. I have used gentle leaders. I often allow people, my more advanced students, to use them in class who know how to use them. And I know I'm contradicting myself, but people that use them properly, they can be an okay tool. And in a different video, we'll talk a lot about the tools and what we're using. But how does a gentle leader work? So let's walk through this. I'll make sure that my brain isn't fried. So a gentle leader. I'm sorry, I wish you could see. I have this dog who is lying on my feet now because she's such a big lug nut. There's a whole room she could be lying in. She's got to be here. So the gentle leader. So what's the first piece? There's actually two parts to a gentle leader. Dog pulls and then stops pulling, right? That's the hook. It's on the snout, it tightens, and then it releases. So there's actually two parts. So the first part, if the dog runs, the gentle leader tightens and stops the dog from lunging or running off, right? So it's adding something to stop a behavior, adding pressure to stop a behavior. So where does that fall? Positive, adding something, stop a behavior. So the first action of a gentle leader is usually positive punishment, right? But why do they work is it's followed by the release of pressure. So the pressure goes away so that I know that when I'm closer to my person, the pressure goes away, right? So it's followed by negative reinforcement because the pressure went away. So I stopped. I'm going to stay closer. It's reinforcing, backing off that gentle leader by removing pressure. So then the gentle leader comes down here, and moves from positive punishment, followed by negative reinforcement. So this is why I want to start looking at these, is it's always complex chains. It's not just I can only be positive reinforcement all the time, because my dog is going to figure out where punishment and reinforcement last. So what I can do is if I concentrate solely on positive reinforcement, don't even worry about the other three quadrants. All I want to do is say, I want to reward my dog for the behavior I want. I want to be more exciting to the dog so that they stay around me, so that they have behavior I want. I'm going to reward calm. I'm going to reward and teach my dog confidence by rewarding little bits and pieces as they show confidence, as they show some grit and focus. Like if we're doing the obstacle course that we've got, as my dog learns, you know, I don't want to lure them everywhere. I just want to show, hey, we can have fun together. I'm not going to push you too hard, but I am going to reward the great behaviors. I'm going to reward you for trying. I'm going to reward you for failing. I'm going to reward you for stepping on something like a teeter-totter. I'm going to reward you for pausing. So it just becomes like, oh my God, I get all these rewards. And then as we advance, we break it down into the rewards only come when there's a certain behavior. So it's not just throwing treats out for everything. It's the behavior is only when you're lined up at my side. Then you get the reward. And then when you're complete with the whole course, you get the reward. But they learn more and more that they can focus and work. And then the reward comes as your dog ages. So real quick, we're going to just look at, excuse me, dog, the principles of positive reinforcement. And there's just 10 pieces, I believe. It's going to be downloadable. We'll make it downloadable somewhere in one of the links here. Find it. Otherwise, you can go to our website and download. But the principles of positive training, basically what we're looking at is simply that, excuse me, gotta get around this dog. A behavior is rewarded. A behavior that's rewarded is most likely to occur. That's the reinforcement. That's just simple. So that's number one. Behavior that is rewarded is most likely to keep occurring. Dogs learn by association. So that's all the people we talked about at the beginning, the Pavlov, Skinner, Thorndike, Premack, is they associate. So this action brought this consequence. It's a good consequence. I'm more likely to do that action. So that's a simple piece, is that they associate, hey, this was a great thing to do. So I made that association that the act of sitting gets a treat in my mouth. I'm going to do that more. We always want to reward behaviors we want rather than punishing the behaviors we don't. Because as we see, if dogs learn by association and we're punishing a behavior, we don't know what association they made. There was a great study actually done. I'll have to find out who did this, so I don't just randomly quote studies, but dogs learn so much by association that they were showing when a dog, sorry, we're just going to talk about this. Dog poops in the room, and we usually go, yeah, but he knows he did something bad. Look at him slink away. Well, let me tell you about the association that your dog generally does on that, is that they associate that there's poop on the carpet. Not that they put poop on the carpet, but there's poop on the carpet. Human walks in. So human walks in, poop on the carpet. What happens? Human goes crazy. So that's a bad association. Poop on the carpet causes crazy behavior from the human. So crazy behavior means that's intimidating. So I'm going to slink. I'm going to give you the puppy dog eyes. I'm going to curl my tail around. All the behaviors that we think look like, oh, my dog's guilty. They know better. They know they shouldn't have done that. No, they don't. They know that those puppy dog eyes and the cute little curl and looking up at you gets crazy lady to stop it and come over and pet them. So they associate, oh, poop, crazy lady, puppy dog eyes, no crazy lady, right? Like that's the association. It's that simple. They're not thinking, oh, gosh darn it, that poop on the carpet again. I shouldn't do that. I'm a bad dog. I feel terrible. They're doing dog behavior, which is go away, surrender. I'm so sorry. And what is that? That's all positive reinforcement. They're making you stop by, so your dog's training you for what? Dog gives you puppy dog eyes, you stop yelling. So punishment, because you're going to stop yelling. They added puppy dog eyes. That's an addition. So that's probably your dog is training you through positive punishment, saying, hey, if I just do this action, the crazy thing stops, right? So that's what we like. Whoa. Thank you, Luna. Wait, thank you. You just kicked the camera. So now we have a whole different view of me. That works. So, okay. So behavior that's rewarded is most likely to occur. 2, dogs learn by association. 3, reward the behaviors you want rather than punishing the behaviors you don't want. Extinction. That is a principle. It's very hard to actually have an extinction of a behavior is one that if you ignore it enough, it will go away. So if you do enough of this turn the back thing, the behavior will stop. Here's the problem with extinction is that I have to completely ignore it. So I have to turn my back, I have to shut off my energy. I have to not care. I don't have that ability. And I've been training for 20 years. I can't. If my dog's barking, I can't just be like, whatever, I'm just going to ignore it. So often ignoring a behavior, what we end up doing is teaching duration. We teach them to bark longer because they know when they bark and bark and bark, eventually we're going to come over and bark back at them by yelling or letting them outside or whatever they want, so that they learn, hey, I'm going to bark faster, aggressively. So extinction is a hard one, but it is one of the principles of positive reinforcement is that we reinforce the behaviors we want, ignore the ones we don't, hoping that the ones we don't like extinct and fade away. So that's the fourth piece. We have to think number 5, positive reinforcement is something the dog wants. So we always have to get to know our particular dog in that particular day. What do they see as a positive reinforcer? We got to do jackpot a lot. So your dog does a great thing, jackpot, they get all the rewards. And what that does is it turns them into a gambler. So if occasionally we just reward the heck out of something, they start going, hey, if I do that more, there's a good chance I'm getting this awesome positive reinforcement. So that's just a good gamble. I'm going to put all my eggs in that basket and do that behavior over and over and over. Sometimes that works with dogs because they're seeing something as a positive reinforcement in a behavior we don't like that barking at the window. We don't like it, but they're like, well, it made the thing go away. And it's pretty fun and it got me jacked up. So, I'm ready to roll. I'm going to keep doing that behavior. We have to find an alternative behavior quite a bit. So we can't stop a behavior. We have to replace the behavior. So we've got to show them there's something more rewarding than barking at that window or jumping or pulling on leash. So we always are teaching in positive reinforcement an alternative behavior. We've got to raise the criteria gradually. If you've seen my ABCs, we talk about association, bit by bit, consistency, and state context. But that raise the criteria gradually is usually where us humans fall apart. We do this, I did step 1 and 2, and then I go to step 5. I did sit and stay really successfully in the kitchen, and then I bring them out to the dog park, and my dog doesn't listen. So then what am I yelling? Sit, sit, sit. So we've got to just raise criteria gradually. That's number 6. Number 7 is if trained correctly, behavior is not contingent on food being present. That means we have to eventually fade out this constant treat. But we start, especially those of you out there that have puppies, we start by just reward, 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 reward. Then we turn them into that jackpot gambler. And we have to make sure that the behavior is because the behavior can happen, not because there's a treat present. And that's usually where most of us fall off training because we've gotten so dependent on treats. I'm not saying we don't do treats. I use them a lot. But if my dog doesn't know how to sit without there being a treat right in front of their nose, then they don't even know the sit command. So, we've got to be able to sit without any treats. So that's one of the principles, number 9 of principles of positive training, that if trained correctly, food does not need to be present to get the behavior done. And then number 10 is training is a lifelong. It's a fun behavioral interaction between you and your dog. So it's not a one and done thing. It's not a sit, treat, great, my dog knows sit forever. It's just what do we got to do? We teach sit, we're out for a walk, sit, great, let's keep going. Let's, go around, let's go through my legs, let's have some fun, let's play a little fetch, 2 paws up, go over, under. Walks, it's an adventure, and life's an adventure. So if we got our dogs and we're saying I just want my dog to listen to me and do as they're told, that's not a very fulfilling relationship with the dog from the dog's perspective. So it's going to be a lot harder to train because we're asking the dog to do some pretty boring things and just shut up and listen and be a robot. And that's not why we got a dog. We got a dog so that they can express their goofy behavior. We can go out and about and do some fun things, but we got to do that by listening with our dog and having these positive interactions. So when you train with Castellina canines, obviously we focus on this positive reinforcement. and let the world play out in the world of negative reinforcement, positive punishment, and negative punishment. Because I want to be the best thing for my dog to be around. I want to give him the best life. I want my world to be big. And so we got to talk about what are my goals, and does my Luna dog have the same goals, or is something different in her world, and then I've got to compromise. So it's a relationship, and that's the last principle of positive training, is that it's a lifelong relationship between you and your dog. So we'll put those, I'll list them down below in the comments, and that way you'll know the principles of positive training. But I think it was pretty geeky, but so I love those of you that stuck in there. But that's what I wanted to explain, these 4 quadrants, and what do we really mean by positive reinforcement. That it's not just treats, 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 because if my dog doesn't value treats, or the treat is not as interesting as a squirrel, it doesn't matter. I could put that treat in front of their nose all day long. They don't care. One of my mentors hates clowns, so he talks about this all the time. If you put clown and gave him birthday cake, he's not going to take birthday cake because he hates clowns that much. So, for me, it'd be snakes. Put me in a pit of snakes and hand me donuts. No, thank you on donuts right now. I am in a pit of snakes. This is a terrible situation. I'm in, overload. I can't take a treat right now. And that's how dogs are too, is if they're overstimulated and having fun in lots of different areas, they are not going to want to be rewarded. So that reward may be leaving the situation. The reward may be coming inside if I don't like the environment. So we'll get really creative with what our rewards are. But that's the basics of what is positive reinforcement. So thanks for hanging in there. Again, I'm Heather Purdy with Casa Luna Canines, dog training, human learning. Please contact us with any questions, concerns, comments, leave them below. We'll try to answer them, because I know this is going to be a controversial topic for a lot of folks, but I just wanted you to know that what we talk about is positive reinforcement training and why it matters. All right, until next time, remain calm, confident, and connected.